I never imagined my own son would drive away and leave me standing outside Union Station in the middle of November with nothing but the flannel shirt on my back. No wallet, no phone, no house keys, not even a jacket. But that is exactly what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in Toronto, when I was 64 years old and still foolish enough to believe that blood meant something. It started with a phone call that morning. My son Gavin rang me at my basement apartment in Scarborough, sounding warmer than he had in years. "Dad," he said, "I got us 2 tickets on the Via Rail to Montreal. Leaving this afternoon. I want to take you to that steakhouse Mom always talked about, the one on Rue St. Denis. Just you and me. A weekend trip. I will pick you up in an hour." I should have questioned it. Gavin and I had not taken a trip together since he was 14, back when his mother Helen was still alive and could bridge the silence between us. But hearing him mention Helen's name, that restaurant she had always wanted to try but never got the chance before her heart gave out 8 years ago, something in me cracked open. I wanted it to be real. I needed it to be real. I showered, put on my cleanest shirt, packed my old canvas duffel, the one I had carried to job sites for 30 years as a plumber. When Gavin's black SUV pulled up, I was already waiting on the curb like a kid on the first day of school. He looked sharp behind the wheel, clean-shaven, wearing one of those slim-fit coats his wife Danielle probably picked out. He worked in commercial real estate now, selling office towers and retail spaces to people who had more money than they knew what to do with. A long way from the kid who used to hand me wrenches under kitchen sinks on Saturday mornings. "Put your bag in the back, Dad," he said without getting out. "And toss your backpack in too. I do not want us lugging stuff through the station. I will grab everything when we park." I did what he asked. My backpack had everything in it. Wallet with 3 credit cards, my Ontario health card, my driver's license, $240 in cash, my phone, my reading glasses, my house keys. I zipped it into the trunk next to my duffel and climbed into the passenger seat. He barely talked during the drive downtown. Kept checking his mirrors, his jaw working like he was chewing on something he could not swallow. I asked about Danielle, about my grandson Wyatt, about whether Wyatt was still obsessed with dinosaurs. One-word answers. "Fine. Yeah. I guess." I told myself it was just work stress. Gavin always got quiet when deals were not closing. We pulled up to the drop-off lane at Union Station. He kept the engine running. "Go in and wait by the Via Rail departure board," he said. "I will park and meet you inside. Our train leaves at 2:15. I got out. Walked toward the entrance. Turned around to wave, but he was already pulling into traffic, moving fast. Not toward the parking garage. Toward the on-ramp for the Gardiner Expressway heading east. I stood there watching his taillights disappear and told myself he was just circling the block. 20 minutes passed. Then 40. I stood beneath the departure board watching other travelers check their tickets, couples holding coffee cups, families with children, a group of university students laughing about something on a phone. I watched all of it from the outside, the way you watch fish in an aquarium when you are standing in a dark room. When I reached for my phone to call him, my pocket was empty. Then the other pocket. Then I patted my chest, my back pockets, even checked inside my shoes out of some desperate reflex. Everything was in the backpack. The backpack was in his trunk. And his trunk was heading east on the Gardiner at 90 kilometers an hour. The realization did not hit all at once. It crept in like cold water rising around your ankles. First the inconvenience, then the confusion, then the slow, sickening understanding that this was not an accident. The sudden invitation. The insistence I put everything in his car. The quick getaway without looking back. My son had planned this. I stood there for another half hour, hoping I was wrong. A Via Rail attendant asked if I needed help finding my platform. I mumbled something about waiting for someone. She moved on. An older couple asked me for directions to track 3 and I pointed the way, functioning on autopilot while my insides turned to concrete. Eventually a security guard approached. polite but direct. Sir, if you are not traveling today, I am going to have to ask you to clear the area. You have been standing here for over an hour. I tried to explain. My son dropped me off. He has my things. My wallet, my phone. I think there has been a misunderstanding. But even as I said the words, I knew they sounded pathetic. The guard's face softened from professional concern into something worse. Pity. He walked me to the front street entrance and told me I could wait outside. If your son comes back, he said, you can re-enter through the main doors. He did not say if. He said when. But we both knew which word he meant. November in Toronto is not forgiving. The wind comes off Lake Ontario with a bite that goes straight through flannel. I sat on a concrete bench near the taxi stand, watching cabs pull up and drive away, watching people climb into warm cars, watching the city move around me like I was a rock in a river. I had no money for transit, no phone to call anyone, and the only person I might have contacted was my brother Paul in Thunder Bay, whose number I had not memorized since cell phones made that unnecessary. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly disposable. Not just old. I had been waking up with sore knees and a bad shoulder for years. But discarded. Set aside like a broken tool that no one wanted to fix. I kept turning over the past year in my mind, looking for the cracks I had missed. The way Gavin flinched when I showed up to his office Christmas party in my work boots. How he introduced me to Danielle's parents as Warren, just Warren, no mention of the word father. The time he asked me not to tell his colleagues what I did for a living. Just say you are retired, Dad. Leave it at that. I had laughed it off then. Told myself he was just ambitious, just navigating a world that ran on appearances. But sitting on that bench with the wind cutting through me, I could not laugh anymore. Excuse me. The voice was low and unhurried, the kind of voice that comes from a chest that has been breathing for a very long time. I looked up. An elderly man stood in front of me, tall despite a slight curve in his spine, leaning on a wooden cane with a brass handle shaped like a duck's head. He wore a dark wool overcoat that hung perfectly on his thin frame, and his white hair was combed straight back from a face that was all angles and sharp attention. He was at least 80, probably older, but his eyes were the youngest thing about him. Clear, watchful, measuring me without apology. I could not help noticing you have been sitting here for quite some time, he said. And you do not appear to be waiting for a taxi. I am fine, I said, which was the most obvious lie I had told in 64 years. He studied me for a moment, then gestured to the bench. Do you mind? I shrugged. He lowered himself carefully, placing the cane across his knees. We sat in silence for a beat, watching a woman wrestle a stroller through the station doors. You are not fine, he said, not as a question. You are stranded, you have no coat in November, and unless I am mistaken, you have been crying without realizing it. I touched my face. He was right. My cheeks were wet. Something about the directness of this stranger broke through whatever wall I had been holding up. I told him. Not everything, not the years of growing apart, but the basic facts. My son invited me on a trip. Drove me here. Took everything and left. I have no money, no phone, no way home. The old man listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly, as though I had confirmed something he already suspected about the world. My name is Arthur Pennington, he said. I live in Forest Hill. I have a car arriving in a few minutes to take me home. And I have a proposition for you that is going to sound absolutely insane. I looked at him. I am not interested in charity. This is not charity. This is a transaction. He shifted on the bench, his knuckles tightening around the cane. I need someone to come to my home this evening and pretend to be my son. Just for one dinner. In exchange, I will drive you home tonight, replace your phone, and give you $5,000 cash. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. Why on earth would you want me to do that? Because my real son died 19 years ago, Arthur said, his voice steady but thin at the edges. And ever since, I have been surrounded by people who treat me like an open vault. My step-grandson, my lawyer, my housekeeper's family. They all orbit me, waiting. I want to see what happens when they think someone else has entered the picture. Someone with a legitimate claim on my affection. I want to see who they really are before I finalize my will. A black Lincoln pulled to the curb. A driver in a dark jacket stepped out and opened the rear door. "Mr. Pennington," he said. "Ready when you are." Arthur stood slowly. "The offer is genuine, Mr. Buckley." "Warren Buckley." "Mr. Buckley. You can walk away, and I will not think less of you. Or you can spend a few hours helping an old man run an experiment, and you will leave tonight with more than you came with." He paused. Which, given the circumstances, is not a high bar. I looked at the Lincoln, then at the long cold walk back to Scarborough, then at my own reflection in the station window. A 64-year-old man in a flannel shirt with red eyes and empty pockets. What exactly would I have to do? Come to dinner. Be pleasant. When I introduce you as my son, do not correct me. Call me Dad if it comes up naturally. That is all. I thought about Gavin driving away without looking back. About the apartment I could not enter without keys. About the fact that no one in the world was expecting me anywhere. "All right," I said. "One dinner." Arthur's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. It was closer to relief. The drive to Forest Hill took 20 minutes. I had spent decades working in Toronto's wealthy neighborhoods, replacing burst pipes in Rosedale mansions, fixing water heaters in Bridle Path estates. I knew these streets from underneath, crawling through crawl spaces and kneeling on cold basement floors. I had never ridden through them in the back seat of a Lincoln. Arthur's house sat behind a low stone wall on a street where the trees were old enough to have witnessed both world wars. It was a 3-story Tudor-style home, dark brick with white trim, not the biggest house on the block but somehow the most dignified. The kind of place that did not need to show off because it had nothing to prove. "Welcome home, son," Arthur said as the car stopped. There was a glint in his eye, half mischief, half something sadder. The front door opened before we reached it. A woman in her late 50s appeared, wiping her hands on an apron. She had the official look of someone who ran a tight ship and did not appreciate unscheduled arrivals. "Mr. Pennington, you did not mention a guest." "I have only set the table for," she stopped. Looked at me. Looked at Arthur. "Dorothy," Arthur said calmly, "this is Warren. My son. He has come home." Dorothy's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, confusion, and then a flicker of something territorial. "Your son," she repeated carefully. "But I thought, people think a great many things that turn out to be wrong," Arthur interrupted gently. "Warren will be joining us for dinner. Please set another place. And perhaps 2 more, in case our other guests are hungry." Dorothy disappeared inside without another word, but I caught the look she threw over her shoulder. It was the look of someone recalculating a future she thought she had already figured out. "Who else is coming?" I asked as Arthur led me through a foyer with hardwood floors and a grandfather clock ticking in the corner. "My lawyer, Patricia Voss. She has been aggressively helpful with my estate planning lately. And Dorothy's nephew, a man named Liam, who has been visiting with suspicious regularity. He took odd jobs at my place for years, mowed the lawn, cleaned the gutters. Recently he has upgraded to bringing flowers and asking about my health." Arthur's tone was dry enough to start a fire. "They should both find your presence very educational." He showed me to a sitting room with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking a garden where the last autumn leaves clung to the branches like stubborn old men. The house was beautiful, but it echoed. Too many rooms for one person, too much silence soaking into the walls. "I should tell you something," Arthur said, settling into a leather armchair. I was not entirely forthcoming at the station. I tensed. "What do you mean? This is not just a test." He looked at the garden. I have stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors give me 4 months, possibly 5. And in these last months, I have been thinking about my son, William. What happened with William? Arthur was quiet for a long time. He wanted to be a musician. Piano, guitar, violin. The boy could play anything with strings. I wanted him to take over my lumber business. Pennington Timber built half the homes in northern Ontario. I told him music was a hobby, not a career. We argued. He moved to Vancouver Island. I told him not to bother coming back until he had a real job. Arthur's voice cracked, just slightly, like ice forming on a puddle. He never came back. Meningitis took him at 27. His roommate called me. By the time I flew out, he was already gone. I found out at the funeral that he had been teaching music to children at 3 different schools. Every parent there told me how much he meant to their kids. And I had spent his last years telling him he was wasting his life. The weight of that sat between us like a third person in the room. So you want me to play the son you lost, I said quietly. No. I want you to be the son who came back. Not William. I know the difference. But I want to feel what it might have been like. To have someone in this house who is here because they want to be, not because they are counting the silver. And you think I am that person because I have nothing to gain. I think you are that person because you have nothing left to lose. Arthur looked at me with those sharp old eyes. There is a freedom in that, Warren. A clarity. I need someone clear-eyed around me right now. Everyone else's vision is fogged up with dollar signs. Dinner was set for 6:30. The dining room had a table that could seat 12 but was laid for 5. Arthur took the head, me to his right. Dorothy served from a sideboard, her movements precise and her expression unreadable. Patricia Voss arrived first. She was perhaps 60, silver-haired, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than 2 months of my pension. She carried a leather portfolio and had the permanently alert expression of someone whose hourly rate never stopped ticking. When she saw me, she froze for half a second before recovering. Arthur, she said. Who is this? Patricia, I would like you to meet Warren. My son. The lawyer's composure held, but barely. Arthur, your son William passed away in 2006. I have the death certificate in your file. Warren is from before my marriage, Arthur said smoothly. We have recently reconnected. He said it with such conviction that even I almost believed it. Patricia sat down slowly, her eyes moving between us, running calculations I could practically hear. Liam showed up 10 minutes later. He was in his early 30s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of tan you get from working outside and the kind of smile you practice in the mirror. He brought a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates for Dorothy, which struck me as either very thoughtful or very strategic. When Arthur introduced me, Liam's smile stayed in place but his eyes went flat. Your son, he said. That is news. Life is full of surprises, Arthur replied. Sit down, Liam. The roast is getting cold. That dinner was one of the most uncomfortable meals I have ever eaten, and I once spent an entire Thanksgiving sitting between my ex-brother-in-law and the man his wife left him for. Patricia kept steering the conversation toward legal matters, toward the importance of clear documentation, of verifiable claims, of how courts view sudden appearances by previously unknown heirs. She was not subtle about it. Liam was worse. He watched me the way a dog watches another dog that has wandered into its yard. So, Warren, he said, loading my name with false friendliness. What line of work are you in? Retired now. Spent 30 years as a plumber. A plumber. Liam glanced at Patricia. And you were just reconnecting with your father now. After all this time. Sometimes it takes hitting bottom to realize what matters, I said. I was thinking about the train station, about Gavin's taillights. The words came out raw and honest in a way I had not intended. Arthur reached over and put his hand on my arm. Well said, son. I watched Liam's jaw tighten. Patricia scribbled something in her portfolio. After dinner, Patricia cornered Arthur in his study. I could hear her measured voice through the door, the tone people use when they are trying to sound reasonable while saying something unreasonable. Liam found me in the hallway. "I do not know what you are pulling," he said, dropping the friendly act completely. "But I have been looking after that old man for 6 years. 6 years of fixing his roof and driving him to appointments and sitting through his stories about the lumber business. You do not just walk in off the street and what?" I said. "I am not after anything, Liam. Arthur invited me to dinner. That is all." "Right. An old man dying of cancer just happens to invite a stranger home and call him his son." He stepped closer. "My Aunt Dorothy has given 23 years to this house. 23 years. And I am not going to let some drifter in a flannel shirt ruin what she has earned." He laughed before I could respond. I stood alone in that hallway with its antique sconces and framed photographs and wondered what I had walked into. This was supposed to be simple. A few hours, a ride home, some cash. Instead, I was standing in the middle of someone else's family war. Arthur found me there. I apologize for Liam. He is not a bad person, but he has convinced himself that loyalty should come with a price tag. I have seen it before. People confuse proximity with entitlement. "I should go," I said. "This is more complicated than I signed up for. It is late. It is cold. And unless I am wrong, you cannot get into your apartment without keys." Arthur's voice was gentle. "Stay the night. Tomorrow I will have a locksmith at your place, a new phone in your hand, and the money I promised. Please, Warren. These walls do not hear enough voices anymore." He was right about the practical things. I had nowhere to go. But it was the last part that got me. The loneliness in his voice, so carefully disguised as a reasonable argument. I recognized it because I heard the same thing in my own voice most nights. "One night," I said. "But in the morning, I am Warren Buckley, retired plumber from Scarborough. No more pretending." Agreed. He showed me to a guest room on the 2nd floor. Queen-size bed with a down comforter, an ensuite bathroom with a clawfoot tub, a window looking out onto the garden. He had laid out a set of clean clothes, a sweater, and trousers that were close to my size. That detail stopped me. Had he planned this? Had he gone to that station looking for someone? I did not ask. Some questions are better left for the morning. "Thank you," I said. Arthur paused in the doorway. "No. Thank you. You have given an old man something he has not had in a very long time." "What is that?" "The sound of another person breathing in this house." He closed the door quietly, and I stood there in that beautiful room feeling like the world had tipped sideways. 24 hours earlier, I had been making instant coffee in my kitchen in Scarborough, thinking about whether to watch the Leafs game or just go to bed early. Now I was wearing a stranger's clothes in a Forest Hill mansion, caught between a dying man's loneliness and a family's greed. I lay in that bed, the most comfortable thing I had ever slept on, and thought about Gavin. Not the man who drove away today, but the boy who used to sit on the bathroom floor and watch me fix leaks, asking why water always ran downhill, asking why pipes were round and not square, asking questions that deserved better answers than I gave. That night turned into a week. I did not plan it. Arthur asked me to stay for breakfast, and over eggs and toast he made a second offer. Stay for 7 days. Help me organize some things around the house. Keep me company. At the end of the week, $20,000. I told him it was too much. He told me it was less than he paid his accountant for a single month. When you are dying, he said, money becomes strangely meaningless. It is time that has value. And I am running out of things to spend mine on. So I stayed. Arthur kept me busy. We went through his library, boxing up books for donation. We spent afternoons in his garden, raking leaves that neither of us had the stamina to bag but neither would admit it. He told me about building Pennington timber from a single sawmill in Kapuskasing into one of the largest lumber suppliers in the province. About the years he spent in logging camps, sleeping in bunkhouses, eating beans from a can. About meeting his wife, June, at a dance hall in Sudbury when he was 22 and she was 19 and they both had sawdust in their hair. I told him about Helen. How we met at a plumbing supply store where she worked the counter, how she laughed at my terrible jokes, how she could fix a running toilet faster than I could. How losing her was like having the ground removed from under your feet without warning. We talked the way men talk when they have stopped trying to impress anyone. Straight. Simple. Honest. Dorothy warmed up after the third day. She started bringing us tea without being asked, sitting with us sometimes, telling stories about Mr. Pennington's early years in the house. He was different, she confided to me one afternoon while Arthur napped in his chair. Before you came, he spent most of his time in that study staring at old photographs. Now he is laughing again. He is arguing about hockey again. He called his doctor yesterday and did not sound defeated for the first time in months. Liam, on the other hand, escalated. He showed up 4 times that week, each visit angrier than the last. The second time, he brought a folder of documents, bank statements, and property records, trying to prove his family's dedication to Arthur. The third time, he accused me of being a con artist and threatened to call the police. Arthur shut it down with a voice that could have frozen the St. Lawrence in July. Liam, I am neither senile nor stupid. Warren is my guest. If you cannot treat him with basic decency, then you are no longer welcome here. Understand? Liam left. But the look he gave me on the way out was the look of a man who had already decided I was the enemy, and nothing would change his mind. On the 4th night, something shifted. Arthur and I were in his study. He had pulled out an old photo album, the kind with sticky pages and plastic covers that nobody uses anymore. He turned to a photograph of a young man sitting at a piano, mid-laugh, his fingers frozen above the keys. William, Arthur said. He was 23 in this picture. Playing at a coffee house on Granville Island. I never went to a single one of his performances. Not one. I looked at the photograph. The young man had Arthur's jawline and June's eyes, and the kind of unguarded joy that only comes from doing exactly what you were put on earth to do. Why did you fight him so hard about the music? I asked. Because I was afraid. Arthur closed the album slowly. I grew up poor, Warren. My father logged trees until his back broke, and then he drank until his liver gave out. I swore I would never be poor again, and I built everything I have on that fear. When William chose music over the business, I did not see an artist. I saw my father. I saw failure. I saw everything I had spent my life running from. He looked at me. The last words I said to my son were that he was throwing away everything I had built. That he was selfish and ungrateful. That he should not come back until he grew up and got a real career. He moved to Vancouver Island, and 3 years later, meningitis. And I will carry those words to my grave, Warren. Every single one. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I told him something I had never told anyone. When Gavin got into university, I did not congratulate him. I told him he was making a mistake. That a trade would give him a real career, that university was for people who were afraid of getting their hands dirty. I told him he was abandoning the work that built our family. And I watched him leave the dinner table without finishing his meal, and I did not go after him. You think that is why he left you at the station? Arthur asked. I think it started there, I said. I think it started the day I told my son his dreams were not good enough. And every year after that, the distance grew, until leaving me at Union Station was just the final step in a journey that I helped start. Arthur reached across the space between our chairs and gripped my wrist. Then do not let it end there. On the 6th day, the phone rang. The prepaid phone Arthur had bought me so I could handle basic calls while sorting out my accounts. Only 2 people had the number, Arthur and the locksmith. But the voice on the other end was neither. Dad? It was Gavin. His voice sounded hollowed out, like someone had taken a spoon and scraped it clean. Dad, please do not hang up. How did you get this number? I called every locksmith in the city until I found the one who changed your locks. He told me he had been contacted by someone at this number. Dad, I have been going out of my mind. I went to your apartment 3 times. You were not there. Your old phone goes straight to voicemail. I filed a missing persons report yesterday. The police told me. You filed a report. The anger I had been holding for 6 days broke through like water through a cracked pipe. You left me at Union Station with nothing, Gavin. Nothing. You took my wallet, my phone, my keys. And now you are calling because you were worried? Where was that worry when you were driving away? Silence. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. I know. I know what I did. There is no excuse. I have been sick over it. Literally sick. Danielle found me throwing up in the bathroom the night it happened, and I could not even tell her why. Then tell me. Right now. Tell me why. Another silence. Then the words came out in a rush, ugly and honest and raw. Danielle's parents were supposed to be on that trip. I lied to you, Dad. They booked a suite at the Fairmont in Montreal for the weekend. And I panicked. I imagined you at dinner with her father, talking about plumbing, telling your stories about backed up drains and frozen pipes, and I saw the look her mother would give. The look that says she already thinks Danielle married beneath her. And I could not face it. So I drove away. I just kept driving and I told myself you would figure it out, that you would be fine, and by the time I realized how insane that was, I could not undo it. Each word landed like a fist. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. My son had thrown me away to avoid embarrassment. And the worst part was that I understood it. I understood it because I had spent years giving him reasons to be embarrassed, refusing to change, refusing to see that the world he had moved into required a different version of me, a version I was too proud to offer. I am not going to tell you it is okay, I said. Because it is not. What you did was cowardly and cruel, and your mother would be heartbroken. I know. But I am safe. I am staying with a friend. And I need time before I can look at you without seeing those taillights. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Arthur was in the armchair by the window, pretending to read a copy of Maclean's, but I knew he had heard everything. Was I too hard on him? I asked. You were exactly as hard as you needed to be. Arthur set down the magazine. He needed to hear what he did, described honestly, by the person he did it to. That is not cruelty, Warren. That is respect. You respected him enough to tell the truth. What do I do now? That depends. Do you want him back in your life? I closed my eyes. I thought about Gavin at 14, sitting in the passenger seat of my old work van, singing along to the radio, getting every lyric wrong and not caring. I thought about him at 22, graduating from university, looking into the crowd for my face and finding it, and the way he smiled when he saw me, before everything got complicated. Yeah, I said. I do. Then give him the chance Robert never gave William. Arthur's eyes were wet. Do not let pride win. Pride is a cold comfort when you are dying alone. That night was my last night at Arthur's house, according to our original deal. He insisted on marking the occasion. Dorothy made a roast that could have fed 10 people, and Arthur opened a bottle of wine from a case he said he had been saving for something worth celebrating. To accidental friendships, he said, raising his glass. To second chances, I replied. We ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about the year he spent working at a logging camp near Timmins when he was 18, sleeping in a tent in January, nearly losing 2 toes to frostbite. I told him about the time I flooded an entire floor of a Yorkville condo because I forgot to shut off the main valve. We laughed until Arthur started coughing, and Dorothy appeared with his medication and a look that said she had been listening from the kitchen. After dessert, Arthur put down his fork and looked at me with an expression I had seen only once before, on Helen's face the night before her surgery, when she told me where she kept the insurance papers. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to listen before you react. Arthur. Tomorrow morning Patricia is coming to finalize my will. I have made changes. Significant ones. If this is about money, I do not want it. I am serious, Arthur. That is not why I stayed. I know. And that is precisely the reason." He folded his napkin carefully. "Most of my estate is going to establish a music education fund in William's name. Every cent of the business accounts, the investments, the royalties. It will provide instruments, lessons, and scholarships to children in Northern Ontario who cannot afford them. William would have wanted that." "That is beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "The house, however." Arthur looked around the dining room, at the walls that had held his family and his grief for decades. "The house I am leaving to you." I put my glass down so hard the wine nearly spilled. "No. Absolutely not. The conditions are specific. You cannot sell it for 5 years. You must live in it at least 6 months of each year. And you must keep the guest room ready. Once a year, at minimum, you take in someone who needs what you needed. Someone stranded, someone lost, someone discarded by the people who should have loved them most. You give them a roof and a meal and a week to find their footing. Arthur. This house is worth millions. You have known me for 6 days. 6 days, and you are the most honest person I have met in 19 years. Everyone else who walks through that door sees a property assessment. You see a home. There is a difference, and it matters." I could not speak. Dorothy was crying quietly by the sideboard. Arthur reached across the table and put his hand over mine, and I let him, because in that moment he was not a wealthy man giving away an asset. He was a father asking another father to carry something forward. The reading the next morning went exactly as badly as Arthur predicted. Patricia arrived with her portfolio and a barely concealed expression of professional distress. Liam showed up with his own lawyer, a young man in a pinstripe suit who looked like he had graduated law school approximately last Thursday. When Patricia read the clause about the house, Liam erupted. 6 days. He has known this man for 6 days. And you are handing him a property worth $12 million over people who have been part of your life for years. You have been part of my proximity, Liam. Not my life. There is a difference. Arthur's voice was calm but carried the authority of a man who had once commanded logging crews in a blizzard. You painted my fence and shoveled my walk and brought Dorothy chocolates, and all of it, every gesture, had a price tag attached. You were investing, Liam. Do not pretend it was love. Liam's lawyer started talking about undue influence, diminished capacity, the vulnerability of elderly individuals to manipulation. Arthur let him finish, then opened a folder on his desk. 3 independent psychiatric evaluations, all conducted in the last 60 days. All confirming full mental competence. I anticipated this fight, Liam. I have been anticipating it for years. The room exploded. Liam shouting, Patricia trying to maintain order, Dorothy standing in the doorway with her hand over her mouth. Through it all, I sat in the corner of Arthur's study, watching a dying man defend his right to choose kindness over obligation. Finally Arthur stood. His voice cut through the noise like a saw blade through pine. Enough. This is my house until my last breath, and I will not fill it with this ugliness. Liam, you are receiving $250,000. That is more than generous for a man whose primary contribution to my life has been seasonal yard work. Patricia, your fees are covered and then some. Dorothy, your pension and retirement fund are secured. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. If anyone wishes to contest these decisions, I invite you to spend your inheritance on lawyers. It is your money to waste. The room emptied. Liam slammed the door on his way out. Patricia gathered her papers with the stiff dignity of someone who knows she has lost. Dorothy stayed, wiping her eyes, and squeezed Arthur's hand before retreating to the kitchen. When they were gone, Arthur sank into his chair, looking 20 years older than he had that morning. Was that worth it? I asked. Every word, he said. Then he smiled. You should see your face, Warren. You look like a man who just discovered a pipe has burst and he does not have his wrench. I laughed. I could not help it. And Arthur laughed too, and for a moment the house felt like what it was always supposed to be. I called Gavin that evening. Come to dinner on Saturday, I said. 6 o'clock. Bring Danielle and Wyatt. There is someone I want you to meet. He arrived at Arthur's door looking like a man walking to his own sentencing. Danielle held Wyatt's hand and stared at the house with an expression that combined awe with suspicion. But Wyatt, 5 years old and unaware of adult complications, took one look at Arthur's garden and asked if there were any frogs. Arthur laughed. He crouched down, slowly, painfully, and told Wyatt that there used to be frogs in the pond but they had moved to a bigger pond down the street, and maybe Wyatt could help him build a better frog house so they would come back. Wyatt said he would need supplies. Over dinner, Gavin apologized. Not the slick, rehearsed apology of a man who sold buildings for a living. A broken one. Stumbling. He looked at Arthur and said, "You took in my father when I threw him away. I do not deserve to sit at this table." Arthur waved a hand. None of us deserve what we get, son. The question is what we do with it. Gavin looked at me. I am going to be better, Dad. I know I have said that before, and I know words are cheap. But I am telling you, and I am telling this man who does not know me, because saying it to a stranger makes it harder to take back. It was not a perfect evening. Years of distance do not evaporate over roast beef and mashed potatoes. But it was a beginning. And when Wyatt fell asleep on Arthur's couch with a gardening magazine across his chest, I looked at my son and saw something I had not seen in a long time. Shame, yes. Regret, definitely. But also the faint outline of the boy who used to ask me why water runs downhill. Arthur died 5 weeks later. In his sleep, in his bed, with the window open because he liked to hear the birds in the garden first thing in the morning. Dorothy found him. She said he looked peaceful, which is what people always say, but in Arthur's case I believed it. He had spent his last weeks surrounded by noise, by life, by the sound of other people breathing in his house. I came every day. Gavin came twice a week, sometimes with Wyatt, who had appointed himself head frog researcher and took his duties seriously. Arthur told Wyatt stories about logging camps and piano-playing sons and a wife named June who could dance the waltz in rubber boots. Wyatt listened with the total absorption that only 5-year-olds and very wise old people are capable of. Liam contested the will, as expected. It took 14 months. His lawyers argued diminished capacity, undue influence, spontaneous generosity inconsistent with established patterns. Arthur had prepared for all of it. The psychiatric evaluations held. The paper trail was meticulous. The judge ruled in favor of the estate, and Liam walked away with his $250,000 and a grudge that I suspect will outlast us both. The house became mine. Legally, officially, completely. And I have kept every promise. I live here now. I still feel like a plumber who wandered into the wrong house sometimes, especially when the furnace makes a noise and I have to stop myself from grabbing my toolbox. But it is home. The guest room on the second floor has been occupied 11 times in the 3 years since Arthur passed. A woman leading a violent marriage. A 19-year-old kicked out by his parents for reasons that were none of his parents' business. A retired teacher who lost everything in a house fire. A young couple with a baby and nowhere to go. People who needed what I needed that November afternoon. A door that opened when every other door had closed. Gavin and I are not perfect. We probably never will be. But he brings Wyatt every Sunday for dinner, and we are building something in the workshop I set up in Arthur's old garage. Not plumbing. Birdhouses, Wyatt insists they need to be fancy enough for Forest Hill frogs, even though I keep explaining that frogs do not live in houses. He does not care. He just wants to build things with his grandfather, and that is enough. Last month I was at Union Station. Same spot, same bench. I was picking up a kid from Thunder Bay, the latest recipient of the William Pennington Music Scholarship, arriving in Toronto to start at the Royal Conservatory. She was 17, carrying a violin case held together with duct tape and hope. I stood in the arrivals area and thought about that November 3 years ago, when my son drove away and I thought it was the end of something. And I realized it was. But it was also the beginning of something I could not have imagined. Arthur saved me that day. But I think I saved him, too. 2 old men on a bench, both discarded by the people who should have known better, both stubborn enough to try again. I keep Arthur's photograph in the study, next to one of William at his piano. Sometimes I talk to them. Tell them about Wyatt's latest construction project. Tell them about the new guest. Tell them about the scholarship kid who just won a regional competition and cried when she called to share the news. The house in Forest Hill is not a building anymore. It is a living thing, breathing with second chances and borrowed time and the stubborn belief that people are worth saving, even when they have given you every reason to disagree. And every night, I make sure the guest room is ready. Clean sheets, fresh towels, a lamp left on in the window. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting on a bench with empty pockets and wet cheeks, wondering if anyone is coming. Someone is. They just do not know it yet.